I remember a red eye out of London. Cabin lights low, most people pretending to sleep. She was in a window seat, wide awake, like her mind refused to land. About 3 hours in, she asked for tea, and when I handed it to her, she didn't say thank you right away. She said very softly, "Have you ever watched someone rewrite you while you're standing right there?" This is what she told me. My sister played the victim, and my family fell for it. In my family, no one ever said, "Oh, we don't believe you." That would have been too honest, too direct, too uncomfortable. Instead, they said things that sounded softer. "We're just concerned. You're taking this very personally. Let's not turn this into something bigger than it is." Those phrases followed me everywhere. They were spoken gently, carefully, almost lovingly. And that's exactly why they were so effective. Because doubt, when it's wrapped in care, doesn't feel like rejection. It feels like correction. My name is Megan. And for most of my life, I believed my family didn't have favorites. I told myself that often. Different personalities, different needs, different ways of coping. That explanation was easier to live with. I was the steady one, the organized one, the one who didn't forget deadlines, the one who didn't need reminders. If something needed to be done, I did it, quietly, without asking for credit. My older sister Lauren was different. She felt things loudly, reacted quickly, needed reassurance often. She was the one everyone worried about. No one ever used the word unfair, but imbalance doesn't need a label to be felt. I felt it in my body long before I understood it in my head. Laura knew how to take up space, not intentionally, not maliciously, just naturally. When she entered the room, conversations adjusted around her. When she sighed, people noticed. When she was upset, everything slowed down. Her emotions were treated like weather, something you plant around. Mine were treated like background noise. If I was quiet, it meant I was fine. If I was stressed, it meant I was capable. At dinner, her feelings were discussed openly, analyzed, protected. Mine were postponed. "We'll talk later." "Not right now. You'll understand." Later never came. I didn't compete with her. That matters. I didn't compare grades, didn't bring up accomplishments, didn't turn things into a rivalry. I didn't want to win. I wanted peace. So I focused on what I could control: school, structure, long term plans. Effort made sense to me. Effort felt fair. If I worked hard, results followed. That belief carried me for years. The first time something felt wrong wasn't loud. There was no argument, no raised voices. It was the day the letter arrived. A plain envelope, thick paper, an official seal that felt heavier than it should have. I held it in my hands and didn't open it right away. I don't know why. Maybe intuition, maybe fear. Like part of me already knew this moment wouldn't stay clean. My parents found out before I did. Mom walked into my room holding a phone, eyes bright, voice shaking. "Have you seen this?" Dad stood in the doorway, smiling, but it wasn't the relaxed kind of smile. It was tight. "This is serious, Megan," he said. I opened the letter, read it once, then again. The words blurred slightly: opportunity, selection, future. The room went very quiet. They were proud, and I let myself feel proud too. That was important. I didn't downplay it, didn't shrink. For a moment, I allowed myself to believe this could just be a good thing. We sat at the table later that evening, tea steaming, plates untouched, talking about timelines, programs, logistics. Lauren sat across from me. She didn't say much. She stirred sugar into her cup slowly. Too slowly, I noticed it. But I ignored it. I had a long history of ignoring signs that would later explain everything. That night, she came into my room without knocking. I was sitting on my bed, still replaying the day in my head. "Congrats," she said. Her voice was neutral, not warm, not cold, just flat. "Thanks," I said. She leaned against the wall. "You probably think everything's going to change now." "I think I'm just going to study," I replied. That was true. She smiled slightly, not kindly. "Well, see." She left. And for the first time, I felt something tighten in my chest. Not fear, recognition. The next morning, I didn't wake up to my alarm. I woke up to my mother's voice. Soft, careful, the kind of voice you use when you're already bracing yourself. "Megan, can you come downstairs?" Lauren was on the couch, wrapped in a blanket. Her eyes were red. Dad stood by the window. No one looked at me. "We need to talk," Mom said. Her words came slowly, as if spacing them out might soften them. "Lauren hasn't been doing well." I nodded. "She's been overwhelmed," Dad added. I nodded again. "She says she feels pressure," Mom continued. A pause. "From you?" The room shifted. "I barely talk to her," I said. Mom pressed her lips together. "Sometimes that's enough." That was the moment reality tilted. They didn't accuse me. They didn't raise their voices. They reframed me. "We just want you to be more careful," Dad said. "This isn't the time to push," Mom added. "We need to think about the family." I stood there, silent, and understood something terrifying. The version of events had already been chosen, and in that version I was the problem. I went back to my room, closed the door, sat on my bed, and asked myself a question that would follow me for a long time. What if they never wanted to hear my side at all? Lauren never said she was angry. That would have been too obvious, too easy to question. Instead, she said she was struggling, and struggling carries authority. She didn't announce it. It unfolded gradually. First, she stopped going to class some mornings. Then she started saying she couldn't sleep, that her chest felt tight, that her thoughts wouldn't slow down. She described it carefully, not dramatically, not messily, just enough to sound real. My parents rearranged their lives around her without discussing it. Doctor appointments appeared on the calendar. Work schedules shifted. Dinners moved earlier or later, depending on her mood. No one explained anything to me. They didn't need to. I was given instructions. Try not to upset her. Be mindful of your tone. She's fragile right now. Fragile. That word followed me through the house. It softened everything she did and sharpened everything I didn't. Lauren's room became a protected space. Her door was always half closed. Lights dimmed. Voices lowered around it. If I walked too loudly past it, Mom glanced at me. If I laughed on the phone, Dad cleared his throat. I learned to move quietly again, like I had when we were kids. The first sign that the story had left the house came from school, not officially, casually. A girl I'd known since middle school caught up with me near the lockers. "Hey, can I ask you something?" Her voice already sounded apologetic. "Sure." She hesitated, then said it quickly, like ripping off a bandage. "Is it true you've been hard on your sister?" I felt it in my stomach first. A drop, a hollowing. "What do you mean?" I asked. She shrugged, uncomfortable. "I don't know. People are saying you're really cold, like emotionally." No one ever said where it started. That's how I knew it had already spread. Cold, That word again. I forced a small smile. I think there's been a misunderstanding. She nodded too fast. Yeah, probably. But she didn't sound convinced. After that, things shifted subtly. Teachers didn't accuse me. They checked in. How are things at home? You seem quieter lately. Just making sure you're okay. Counselor smiled more, spoke slower, like I might shatter or snap. I started hearing fragments. Straight A students can be intense. Pressure doesn't always show the same way. You never really know what's going on behind closed doors. Behind closed doors. They had no idea. At home, the language changed too. Mom asked me to tone things down. Dad suggested I stop talking about college plans. Just for now, he said, until things settle. Settle meant Lauren feeling better. It never meant me being heard. I realized something then. I wasn't being punished. I was being managed, reduced, adjusted, contained. Lauren watched all of this happen, quietly. Sometimes she looked exhausted, other times observant. One afternoon, I overheard her talking to Mom in the kitchen. I hate being like this, she said softly. I just feel so small around her. Mom answered immediately. You're not small. I wasn't mentioned by name. I didn't need to be. That night, I started writing things down. Not emotionally, clinically, dates, exact phrases, who was present, what Lauren said to our parents, what she said on the phone when she thought no one was listening, when she claimed she couldn't get out of bed and posted a photo from a cafe an hour later, when she told Dad she felt judged after I said nothing at all. I didn't think of it as building a case. I thought of it as anchoring myself, because reality was starting to feel slippery. Then comes the email from the school counselor. Subject line, checking in. It was polite, vague, carefully worded. Concerns have been raised. We want to ensure a safe environment. No assumptions are being made. But there it was, the implication that they wanted to meet. Before next steps, I read it 3 times. My hands were cold. That evening at dinner, my parents talked about Lauren's therapy. How brave she was, how hard she was trying. No one asked how my day was. I waited, then said quietly, the school contacted me. Dad looked up. Why? They're worried, I said. About me. Mom frowned. Because of stress? Because someone reported me. Silence. Mom sighed. Megan, are you sure this isn't a misunderstanding? That word again. Misunderstanding. I looked at them. At how tired they looked, how desperate for calm. And I understood something painful. They didn't want clarity. They wanted quiet. And believing Lauren was the fastest way to get it. That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house breeze around me. Every small sound felt amplified. Every silence felt intentional. I realized something that scared me more than accusation ever could. I was losing control of my own narrative. And once that happens, getting it back is never simple. The counselor's office smelled like lemon cleaner and something old. Carpet that had absorbed too many quiet conversations, too many careful confessions. The door was open when I arrived. That should have felt welcoming. It didn't. She looked up from her desk and smiled. Not warmly, professionally. The kind of smile meant to put people at ease before telling them something uncomfortable. Megan, she said, thank you for coming in. I sat down. The chair was too low. I noticed that immediately. It made me feel smaller. She folded her hands on the desk, neat, deliberate. We've received some concerns, she said. She explained it carefully, like someone trained to speak without leaving fingerprints. As a school counselor, I am required to document concerns if they touch student safety or well-being, she said. And in certain cases, the documentation may be reviewed when a program requests a character or conduct evaluation. She paused, then clarified quickly, almost defensively. Not automatically, she added. Only if a program specifically asks for that information as part of their admissions process. Her voice stayed neutral. Concerns, plural. I waited. Silence stretched between us. She glanced down at her notes, then back up at me. They relate to dynamics at home, she continued, and how those dynamics may be affecting others. Others? Not me, never me. What kind of concerns? I asked. My voice sounded steady. I was proud of that. She hesitated, just long enough to feel intentional. There have been reports suggesting that your behavior may be emotionally harmful. The words landed wrong, like they belonged to someone else. Harmful how? I asked. She tilted her head slightly, as if selecting the safest version of the truth. Pressure, dismissiveness, creating an environment that felt unsafe. Unsafe. I stared at the edge of her desk. I don't treat my sister badly, I said. She nodded. Not agreement, recognition. The kind people use when they think they already understand you. We are not here to assign blame, she said gently. We are just trying to understand patterns. Patterns. I could feel my pulse in my ears. I don't know what pattern you're referring to, I said. She smiled again, still careful. Sometimes high achieving students don't realize the impact their presence can have on others. There it was, the translation. This wasn't about what I'd done. It was about who I was assumed to be. When I left the office, my legs felt light, not weak, disconnected, like my body hadn't caught up to what had just happened. My parents were contacted that afternoon. They didn't wait for me to explain. They were already seated in the living room when I got home. The posture told me everything. Mom perched on the edge of the couch. Dad sat back, arms crossed. This came from the school, Mom said. I nodded. They're worried, Dad added. I waited. They think Lauren feels unsafe. Mom continued, that your behavior might be contributing. I laughed. It slipped out before I could stop it. Not loud, just one sharp breath. Dad frowned. This isn't funny. I know, I said. That's why I'm scared. That word surprised them. Scared. Mom softened immediately. We're not accusing you. But she avoided my eyes. We just want things to calm down. Dad said. There it was again. Calm. Not truth. Not fairness. Calm. They asked me to apologize. Not for anything specific. Just generally. To help reset things. I felt something drop inside me. Not anger. Understanding. Apologies weren't about repair. They were about surrender. A week later, the email arrived. It wasn't just any program. It was a selective academic honors program. The kind that reviews conduct, recommendations, and anything that could signal risk. The subject line was neutral, almost polite. Request for clarification. I opened it slowly, read each sentence twice. They referenced information recently brought to our attention, concerns regarding interpersonal conduct and alignment with institutional values. No accusations, no details, just uncertainty. And uncertainty was enough. My hands shook as I closed my laptop. This wasn't theoretical anymore. This was my future. That night, Lauren sat at the table with us, quiet, subdued, the picture of fragility. Mom talked about her progress in therapy. Dad nodded along. I cleared my throat. They might revoke my acceptance, I said quietly. Mom looked startled. What? Why? Because someone reported me, I said. Dad frowned. Reported you for what? For being me, I thought. Out loud, I said, for harming Lauren emotionally. Silence. Mom exhaled slowly. Megan, are you sure this isn't a misunderstanding? That word again. It followed me everywhere. I looked at them, really looked, at how tired they were, how desperate for peace. And I realized something that hurt more than disbelief. They didn't want clarity. They wanted this to stop. And believing Lauren was easier than questioning everything. That night I didn't sleep. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house, to Lauren's door opening and closing, to my parents whispering in the kitchen. Every sound felt loaded. Every silence felt like a verdict. I thought about how quickly someone's identity can be rewritten, not through lies alone, but through repetition, through concern, through silence. And for the first time, I understood how people lose everything without ever doing anything wrong. Lauren learned something very quickly. She learned that she didn't need to accuse me. She only needed to describe how she felt, and everyone else would do the accusing for her. She never said I was cruel. She said she was afraid. She never said I hurt her. She said she felt small. Those words were impossible to argue with, because feelings don't require evidence. They just require witnesses. I heard her tell the story once, not directly, from the hallway. I had gone to get water late at night and froze when I heard my name. Her voice was low, soft. I don't think she realizes how she looks at me, Lauren said, like I'm a disappointment. Mom answered immediately. Oh, honey, I don't even need her to say anything, Lauren continued. It's the silence, the judgment. Judgment. I leaned against the wall. My chest felt tight. She's so put together, Lauren said quietly. And that I'm just not. Mom sighed. She doesn't mean it. I know, Lauren said quickly. That's what makes it worse. That sentence was perfect. It absolved her of malice while indicting me anyway. The next day, my mother asked me to be gentler. Not kinder, not more understanding. Gentler. As if I were holding something sharp. Just your tone, she said. You don't realize how you come across. How do I come across? I asked. She hesitated. Intense. There it was. That word had followed me for years. Intense meant inconvenient, uncomfortable, hard to manage. I don't raise my voice, I said. I know, she replied, but sometimes that's worse. The narrative settled into place. Lauren was struggling. I was contributing. No one said I was the villain, but no one questioned the story either. At school, the shift continued, not openly, but in posture. Teachers stopped asking me to lead things. Counselors asked me how I was coping. Friends didn't invite me the same way. Not because they believed something specific, because something about me felt risky now. That's how reputations die. Quietly. I tried once. Just once. At dinner. I feel like I'm being talked about without being talked to, I said. Dad cleared his throat. Mom sighed. This isn't about you, she said gently. That sentence landed harder than any accusation, because it erased me completely. Lauren watched. She learned when to cry, when to withdraw, when to say nothing. She learned that silence, when framed correctly, could sound like suffering. One afternoon, she passed me in the hallway. Paused, looked at me. You don't hate me, do you? She asked quietly. I froze. No, I said honestly. She nodded, relieved. And then she said, softly, Sometimes it feels like you do, and walked away. That moment replayed in my head for days, because there was no way to respond to it. Defending myself would make me cruel. Staying silent made me guilty. I stopped trying to explain, not out of spite, out of exhaustion. I started eating alone in my room, studying with headphones on, coming home later. Distance felt safer than conversation, but even distance was interpreted. She's withdrawn, Lauren told Mom. I'm worried about her. Worried, always worried. Concern had become her sharpest weapon. One evening, Dad knocked on my door, sat on the edge of my bed. You know your sister isn't trying to hurt you, he said. I looked at him, really looked. I don't think she's trying to help me either. He didn't answer. Silence again. That was when the last illusion broke. The belief that if I stayed calm enough, reasonable enough, patient enough, someone would notice. They wouldn't. Because noticing would require them to question the version of events that made their lives easier, and that was asking too much. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle, and I finally admitted the truth to myself. This wasn't an emotional misunderstanding. This was a story being told about me, and unless I interrupted it, it was going to finish without my consent. There's a moment when doubt exhausts itself. Not because you find proof, not because someone confesses, but because your body stops cooperating with denial. It happened on an ordinary evening. That's what makes it unsettling. No argument, no confrontation, just sound. Lauren's voice carried down the hallway. I wasn't trying to listen, I was studying. Notes spread out on my bed, laptop open, the house unusually quiet. And then I heard her laugh. Not the careful laugh she used around our parents. This one was light, relaxed, almost playful. I froze. She was on the phone in her room, door half closed. The walls in our house had always been thin. I know, she said, amused. A pause, then, they believe it. I held my breath. No, she doesn't fight back at all, Lauren continued. She just gets quieter. Another pause. That's the part they don't like. I felt my stomach drop. She looks guilty without even trying, she said. People hide that. I closed my laptop slowly. Not because I was calm, because I didn't trust my hands. I stood there in the dark, listening. She wasn't angry. She wasn't emotional. She was describing something she'd already figured it out. A system. She thinks if she behaves, it'll blow over, Lauren said, but that's not how it works. She laughed softly, like someone enjoying a private joke. And that was it. That was the moment. Something inside me went still. Not numb, clear. The confusion evaporated. The endless replays, the self questioning. All of it stopped, because now I knew. This wasn't misunderstanding. It wasn't projection. It wasn't sensitivity. It was intentional. And it had been intentional for a while. That night I didn't cry. I didn't confront her. I didn't even feel angry. I felt focused, which scared me more than panic would have. I opened a notebook. Not a journal, a record. Dates, times, exact phrases. I wrote down what I'd heard, word for word. Then I started adding everything else. The counselor meeting, the email, the comments. I wasn't building a case for revenge. I was building something solid, because reality had stopped feeling solid on its own. Lauren sensed the shift. She always did. The next few days, she changed her approach. She became warmer, kinder, asked me questions she hadn't asked in months. How's school? Are you sleeping okay? Actual parents noticed. Mom smiled more. See, she said, I think things are getting better. I nodded, but I didn't relax. Because improvement in Lauren's world was just another phase. She started saying things like, she seems distant lately. I'm worried she's shutting down. I don't know what she's thinking anymore. Always said gently, always with concern, and always just loud enough to be overheard. At school, the pressure increased. Nothing formal, but real. Teachers watched me differently. Friends hesitated before speaking. I became aware of my expressions, my silence, my posture. Everything could be interpreted, and interpretation had already been decided. Then came the second email from the admissions office, more official, less forgiving. They wanted a call, a scheduled one. My chest tightened when I read it. This wasn't just damage control anymore. This was evaluation, judgment, and Lauren knew it. That night she passed me in the hallway, paused. You should be careful, she said quietly. People are paying attention. I met her eyes. For once, I said, so am I. Her smile faltered. Just a fraction. Enough. I didn't expose her then. I didn't rush. Because I finally understood the rules. She thrived on urgency, on reaction, on emotional collapse. I would give her none of that. Instead, I waited, because people who believe they're untouchable always make mistakes. And Lauren had started to feel very comfortable. The call was scheduled for Friday afternoon. I sat at my desk, hands folded, breathing slow. The admissions officer sounded polite, professional but distant. We've received information that raised concerns about interpersonal conduct, she said. I listened. Didn't interrupt. She mentioned anonymous reports, patterns of behavior, potential risk to community culture. None of it sounded like me, but all of it could be shaped to fit. I'd like to hear your perspective, she said. So I told the truth, not dramatically, not defensively. I explained the situation at home, the escalating narrative, the lack of specifics. She listened, then asked one question. Do you have documentation? I swallowed. Yes. She exhaled softly. And that's important, she said. Most students don't. That was the first time I felt hope in weeks. That evening Lauren came into my room. No knock. She leaned against the doorframe. You seem busy lately, she said. I am. She smiled. You know, stress can make people act unpredictably. I met her eyes. For some people, I said. Her smile flickered. Just for a second. You should be careful, she added. People are watching. So was I. I didn't expose her yet. Not then. I waited, because I finally understood the rules of the game. She thrived on chaos. I would win with consistency. And soon she was going to make a mistake. They always do. Lauren's mistake wasn't dramatic. That's what people always get wrong. They expect manipulation to collapse loudly. A slip, a confession, a moment of panic. Lauren slipped because she got comfortable. It started with paperwork. My parents kept all important documents in a drawer in the hallway. School emails, medical notes, insurance forms. One evening, Mom asked me to grab her insurance card from there. I opened the drawer and saw a printed email on top from the school counselor. Subject line, follow up on student well-being. I recognized the language immediately, not because it was official, because it sounded familiar. I didn't read it all at once. I skimmed. Certain phrases stood out. Emotionally unsafe, consistent pattern, concern for others, neutral words, responsible words, the kind that sound factual while saying nothing concrete. Then I saw it, a sentence I had heard before, not the idea, the wording. Exactly. This kind of silence can be more damaging than yelling. I had heard Lauren say that in the kitchen 2 weeks earlier. Same rhythm, same structure. My hands went cold. People don't accidentally mirror phrasing like that, not unless it's already theirs. That night I didn't confront her. I went back to my room and opened my notes. Old texts, voicemails, dates, times. I lined things up. What she said to my parents, what appeared in emails, what showed up in reports. The pattern didn't need interpretation anymore. Lauren wasn't just talking, she was documenting. Quietly, strategically. She had learned the right language, the language adults trust, concerned, measured, non-accusatory, the language that travels. Her next mistake came 3 days later. She told our parents she had a therapy session scheduled, a long one. She'll be gone most of the afternoon, Mom said. Around noon, I noticed her car, still in the driveway. That alone meant nothing. I checked the clinic's website. They didn't list individual sessions on Wednesdays, only group intake. That still meant very little, so I called. I didn't give a name. I didn't ask about anyone specific, just one general question. Do you offer individual sessions on Wednesdays? They didn't. I thanked them, hung up, and sat there quietly. It was enough. Not to accuse, just to notice. Part 8. When the family couldn't look away. I didn't reveal everything at once. That would have sounded emotional, desperate. Instead, I asked questions. At dinner. Casual. Mom, which clinic is Lauren going to again? Mom answered easily. I nodded, then asked, do they do individual sessions on Wednesdays? Silence. Lawrence Fogg paused mid-air. Mom frowned. I think so. Lauren laughed lightly. Why are you interrogating my therapy? There it was. Deflection. Dad looked uncomfortable. No one's interrogating, he said. But his voice wasn't firm. The next day I showed them the timeline. Not accusations, just facts. Dates, screenshots, emails. I didn't say she lied. I said, I'm trying to understand how the same phrases keep appearing in different places. I said, help me understand this. They sat at the table. Lauren standing this time, watching. Too still. Mom's face changed first, then Dad's. When they read the counselor email side by side with Lauren's text, the resemblance was impossible to ignore. That's very similar wording, Mom said quietly. Lauren snapped. So what? People talk the same. Dad didn't answer. He was staring at the page, at the phrases, at the structure, at the implication. Then I showed them the admissions email, the anonymous report, the overlap. No names, no drama, just alignment. Lauren started crying, loudly, suddenly. This is so unfair, she said. She's twisting everything. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. For the first time, they didn't look at her immediately. They looked at me. Mom spoke carefully. Lauren, did you contact the school? Lauren shook her head too fast. No. Dad asked again, slower. Did you raise concerns about Megan? Lauren's voice cracked. I was just trying to protect myself. There it was. Not denial, justification. The room felt heavy, like something old had finally collapsed. Mom covered her mouth. Dad leaned back in his chair. No one yelled, no one hugged. There was nothing left to soften. That night my parents knocked on my door. Together. They didn't sit down. We owe you an apology, Mom said. Dad nodded. For not asking sooner. For believing comfort over truth. They didn't say that part, but it hung in the air. I didn't feel relieved. That surprised me. I felt finished, like something had burned out. People saying exposure is the ending. Light the truth steps into the room, everyone freezes, and everything snaps back into place. That's not how it works. The truth doesn't fix things, it rearranges the damage. The house felt different after that night. Not calmer, heavier. My parents avoided Lauren. Lauren avoided me. No one knew how to move without bumping into what had been revealed. Mom cried quietly in the kitchen when she thought no one could hear. Dad stayed later at work. Lauren stayed in her room. Door closed, silent. The silence used to belong to me. Now it belonged to her. And somehow they didn't feel like justice. They didn't punish her. Not really. They talked about therapy, about stress, about intentions, about how things got out of hand. I noticed how careful their language still was. No one said manipulation. No one said calculate. They said hurt. They said miscommunication. They said family dynamics. Words that soften accountability. One evening, Mom sat beside me on the couch. I don't know how we missed this, she said. Her voice cracked. I didn't answer, because the truth was simple. They didn't miss it. They chose not to see it. That's harder to forgive. At school, nothing magically corrected itself. The counselor sent a polite follow-up. Thank you for clarifying, as if this had been confusion, not accusation. Teachers stopped watching me so closely, but no one apologized. Rumors don't retract, they fade unevenly. Some people smiled at me again, others stayed distant. The image doesn't need to be allowed to be permanent. Lauren didn't confront me, she didn't apologize. Instead, she told our parents she felt unsafe around me now, that the situation had changed the energy. Mom relayed this gently, as if it were neutral information. I nodded. Inside, something went numb. That night, I packed a bag. Not dramatically, just essentials. Clothes, documents, my laptop. I wasn't running. I was choosing distance. Part 10. What the truth still caused me. I moved out 2 weeks later. A friend's spare room. Temporary, but quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't watch you. I slept for the first time in months. No footsteps outside my door. No careful listening. Just rest. My parents called every day at first, apologizing in fragments. We should have. I didn't realize you were always so strong. That last one still hurt. Strength had never protected me. It had just made me easier to ignore. Lauren stopped talking about me, which was its own kind of relief. But she also stopped taking responsibility. The story shifted again. Now it was. She didn't mean it. She was overwhelmed. She didn't realize the impact. I let it go. Because I finally understood something crucial. Justice doesn't always look like balance. Sometimes it looks like distance. The admissions office called back. They thanked me for the documentation. They said they'd reviewed the situation. They confirmed that my offer would stand. I hung up and sat on the floor, not crying, just breathing. I didn't go home that night or the next. When I eventually did, it felt like visiting a house that remembered me differently than I remembered it. Lauren wasn't there. Mom hugged me too tightly. Dad avoided my eyes. I stayed an hour, then left. Here's the part no one tells you. Even when you're right, you lose something. I lost trust. I lost simplicity. I lost the idea that being quiet and good would protect me. But I gained something else. I learned to recognize when care is conditional, when concern is performative, when silence is safer than explanation. And most importantly, I learned that the most painful betrayal isn't when someone lies about you. It's when the people who know you best decide the lie is easier to live with. People assume that after the truth comes out, everything becomes clear, that there's relief, closure, a clean ending. That's a lie we tell ourselves to survive messy stories. I don't hate my sister. That surprises people. They expect rage or forgiveness. I feel neither. What I feel is distance. And distance is honest. We don't talk much now. Sometimes a message on holidays. Sometimes nothing for months. When we do speak, it's careful. Surface level. Weather, work, neutral territory. She never says my name the way she used to. And I never ask how she's feeling. Some bridges don't collapse. They just stop being used. My parents try. I see that now. They check in more, listen longer, pause before explaining things away. But something fundamental shifted. Trust, once cracked, doesn't return to its original shape. It settles into something more fragile, more aware. Here's what changed the most. I no longer explain myself to people who have already chosen a version of me. I no longer perform calmness to make others comfortable. I no longer believe that being good guarantees being believed. Behind closed doors, I learned something no one taught me growing up. Love without accountability is just permission. Concern without curiosity is control. And silence doesn't mean peace if it's forced. I built a life that doesn't require constant defense. A life where my success isn't an accusation, where my quiet isn't suspicious, where my boundaries aren't treated as cruelty. It took time and it took loss, but it was worth it. Sometimes, late at night, I still replay moments, things I didn't say, questions I didn't ask, but I don't stay there long, because I finally understand this. Not every story ends with reconciliation. Some end with clarity. And behind closed doors, that's enough. Some doors close quietly, some never really do. If this story felt close to home, there's another one waiting for you here. This is Behind Closed Doors. Stay.